I am a middle-aged man, and 6 months ago, I moved back in with my parents. Now, how is it going? Well, the short answer is absolutely wonderful. Now, I'd like to give you some of my background and the reason why I ended up moving back in with my parents and my attitude, and this will help you determine if you're thinking about doing this yourself, where I'm coming from. It'll just give you a lot of information. Now, when I was 19, I ended up moving away from my parents, and this is because I had a wrestling scholarship to a big university, and I moved over 1,000 miles away from where my parents live. So I did that, went to school, got my degree, and I didn't really miss my parents too much during this time period because I was a young guy out trying to find my own way. And then after that, in 2003, I moved to Los Angeles. And I lived in Los Angeles technically from late 2003 to 2012. But during this time, because of work and also for personal reasons, I would travel outside the United States quite a bit. And even though I technically lived there maybe from 2003 to 2012, I would say I maybe spent a total of 6 or 7 years in Los Angeles because I was always going overseas. And back in 2006, I met the woman that would later become my wife. And I definitely also wanted to see her. Some of the reasons I was going over was professionally for work. But then in 2012, I made the decision to just make it a permanent move, basically. Maybe not permanent in the sense to the rest of my life, but at least for a while until I got tired of it. I'm just going to move overseas and make that my life until whenever it is that I want. I'm totally tired of it and I just want to move back to the US. So I moved overseas in 2012 and I had a lot of great successes and I had a lot of fun. And in 2020, things were going better for me in many ways than they'd ever had in my life. I was really having a lot of great success. But at the beginning of 2019, there was a huge change in my life, which ultimately changed my attitude, changed my outlook in life. I had a son. And unless you're someone that's totally irresponsible in life, maybe you had an absentee father or a bad father, or you're just a very immature person that refuses to grow up, there's no way having a kid will not change you. And for me, this really changed my spirituality a lot because, just to give you a little bit of background, I'd been on kind of a long spiritual journey of my own, which started around late 2014. I started to open up to spiritual ideas, and even though I'd kind of abandoned religion, and I guess you could say I was an agnostic for basically my entire adult life, I started to realize things through life experiences that were just true, biblical things that, oh geez, if I would have just lived this certain lifestyle and followed the Bible, well, it could have avoided me a lot of pain and suffering of having to learn through experience. So I started this spiritual journey, but I would never quite bite the bullet. I was halfway there, I think. But then when I had a kid, things got very real because all of a sudden, I had skin in the game. As single people, or even sometimes as married people, if it's just us, you don't really think about this world in a very long-term sense, and you don't really care that much what happens to you. And you don't, a lot of the times, quite frankly, you don't even think about what's going to happen to you, what you would leave behind. You don't really care that your mind's not in that area. But after I had a kid, I couldn't help but become a religious person through studying the Bible and also studying religion. And I just realized that there's things in this world that are out of our control. And I don't have the luxury as a parent, I don't have the luxury of being an atheist. I have to look to above and also give thanks for all the great things all the great blessings that I've received in my life, because I haven't always gotten everything in this world that I wanted, which is really my fault, maybe living a certain lifestyle, getting distracted or whatever. So I haven't always gotten everything that I've wanted, but I've had help from above that I have to acknowledge, where I've gotten everything that I need. And especially with having a healthy baby boy, I'm so grateful. But then I had to start looking into this and researching on my own, and I became religious. Now, a lot of people, they will say, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. And I don't dislike those people, but I understand where they're coming from, and I think they're halfway there. Now, what's the difference between being spiritual and being religious? Well, with religion comes a certain discipline. You have to go to church on the weekend. You have to live a certain type of lifestyle, because to us, we don't have just a general God where we just think, oh, there's a good God and he wants good things for us, or whatever a lot of people believe. We believe in a very specific God that demands very specific things of us, that demands that we live a certain way, which sometimes we fail to live up to, quite frankly. So thankfully we have his grace. But because of this, it's a very disciplined lifestyle that we have to live. And like I said, sometimes people will consider us hypocrites because when you have standards, sometimes we fail to live up to them ourselves. But because of that, I became religious, and it changed my whole outlook on life, changed the way I look at everything, just being a father and now having this sort of religious outlook on life. And I'd been living overseas, like I said, and things were going really great for me in many ways. And I hadn't lived with my parents for so long, and I never had been homesick. I mean, think about this. First, I went away to college. That was over 1,000 miles away from my parents live. Then I went to Los Angeles. That was maybe 2,000 miles away from where my parents live. And then I moved to the Eastern Hemisphere. I couldn't get any further away from my family while still being on the planet Earth. If I wanted to move further away, I would have to move to the space station or move to another planet like Mars or whatever. But for the first time in my life, in 2019, 2020, I started to feel something that I'd never felt in my life, and that was homesick. Because we would Skype with my parents, we would show them the kid, and that's great that we have the technology to do that, but it doesn't replace the real thing of being there. So I started to get really homesick and really want to be around my family really bad, which is kind of strange because I'd never experienced that no matter how far away I was from my parents. But now having a kid, everything's different. And I'd had a kid up to a year old that had never met his grandparents, and they're healthy and they want to meet them. And I started to think about, oh, I got to go back. I want them to meet their grandchild and spend time together. But then if I just go back, they're going to be separated anyways. So I also wanted my kid to meet his great-grandfather, who's 96 years old, and he's still mentally sound at age 96, pretty physically very healthy considering he's 96 years old. And I wanted to do that before it was too late. So Christmas was coming up, and over the winter, my grandfather stayed with my parents. And I was thinking, we got to go back for Christmas. He can spend time with his great-grandfather, spend time with his grandparents. Well, things didn't quite work out, and I didn't make it back for Christmas. So I kind of had this very negative feeling. But then in January, my dad calls me up and he says, hey, make sure your son has a passport because you got to fly back here. And I'm like, why is that? Well, he broke the good news to me that I was being inducted into my state Hall of Fame for wrestling, a great honor, a really great thing to be recognized for all your accomplishments, all the hours of hard work that you did to achieve these accomplishments that are not something that just anyone could do. I mean, you win some of these championships, it'd be a lot easier just to go out and earn $1 million, I'm sure, than to put in the work to earn some of these wrestling championships. And to be recognized like that in your home state is such a wonderful thing. So we ended up flying over in February of 2020. And we were planning on a very nice long vacation, at least 2.5 months. But strangely, before we left, me and my wife, we were both getting these feelings of, we're not coming back. We're just going to go there and we're staying and we're not coming back. And we were both having these feelings. Now, I wish we would have followed through on these a little bit more because as we speak, I still have an apartment overseas that I still have to pay rent on because all my stuff was in there. We didn't move out. And I was kind of praying and I was saying, Lord, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to come back here and maybe finish some of the things that I started? Or do you want me just to stay there? I'm sure you'll show me a sign. And in my head, I had different theories of how this might work out if he wants me to stay. Little could I have known, could any of us regular people have known what was going to happen in the world, obviously. So we come back in February. We go to the state championships where they were having the Hall of Fame induction. I got that. We stayed here about 2 weeks in the US, had a great time catching up with my family, and then the whole world shut down. In fact, our plane tickets are still canceled. We don't even have a way to get back even if we wanted to go back. So going back is not an option, and things are really bad overseas, much more restrictive than here in North Dakota. Here in North Dakota, these past months, for the most part, they've been really great because unlike a lot of other states in the US, unlike many other countries, we have almost no restrictions here. So you walk around. In fact, we were at the public swimming pool yesterday. We were having a great time. You'd never know, just going around here in North Dakota, that anything in the world is going on. It seems like everyone's happy-go-lucky. No one really has any concerns. But obviously, because of the current world situation, which, like I said, there's things in this world that we have no control over. We have no control over what's going on. And for the safety of my family, we've been staying here for 6 months, like I said, totally unplanned. And never did I think that as an adult that I would ever move back in with my parents. It's never something I wanted to do, not something I even considered or thought about doing because I've been so happy being away. But it's been easy actually because I'm just so thankful that my wife is here, and my wife is extremely loved by both my mom and dad and my grandfather. And now we have this new addition to the family, and they're getting to spend so much time with them, and it's so precious. But also what really makes this easier is my outlook on life. Being a religious person, I think it's safe to say that I'm more religious than the average person, and I'm not into fighting over who's more religious than the other person, but in the United States, the average person these days is probably not that religious. So not only am I consider myself a pretty religious person, but my parents actually, growing up, they went to Mass every week. My dad went to Catholic school his whole life, and like even as an adult, he goes to Mass, and to them, it's not something they're preachy about. And most really religious people that are really into it, they don't go around preaching. To my dad, it shows in his actions, in his morality, in his character. And the people that are out there preaching it, of course, a lot of those people, quite frankly, they're frauds. Those are the people maybe you should be most suspicious of in many ways. So we're not preachy people, but I'm sure that we're all very much more religious than the average person, and that really changes your outlook in life. And we've had such a great relationship just as a family and as that. And I think being older, it makes it easier. Now, if you're in your 20s and you want to go out and you want to run around and pick up women every night, which quite frankly, right now with the whole world situation, I don't think you're really even allowed to do that anymore. And I think with the cell phone technology and all these dating apps and stuff, it seems like young guys are scared to approach women in person. Whereas for me, that was a lot of the fun. But a lot of them, they can't talk to a girl unless it's through the internet. So I don't even know if that's an option. But being older and not having that lifestyle, running around, being a wild guy and that kind of thing, being older, having a family, having a religious backbone, that makes the transition a lot easier. Whereas if you're don't have my outlook on life and you'd maybe have some issues where maybe your parents aren't as great as mine and you don't have just those religious overtones, and if you're a younger person that wants to do what a lot of younger people do, it's probably a terrible idea for you to try and move back in with your family. Now, where do we go from here? Are me and my wife and my child and our future children going to just stay in my parents' house forever? Absolutely not. Now, we might not be moving out anytime soon because, like I said, with the current world situation, with things being so unstable, you kind of want to wait a little while to see how things pan out. But especially as we start to have more children in the future, we're going to have to get our own house, and we're going to have to be looking at that. Right now we're already kind of looking, just kind of scoping things out, but we're also want to see how things pan out over the next several months anyways, before we make any drastic decisions, because no one can really dictate what's going to happen, even in America, where we always thought we had this wonderful, stable country. No one even knows, if you look at some of the news, certainly, that will scare the death out of you, which I'm not telling you to live in fear. You should do the opposite. But you kind of have to pay attention to be prudent. If you look at things, it looks like we might not even have a country 5 years from now. So it's kind of hard right now to do long-term planning. But that's where we're going from here. We're going to move out, but we don't want to move far away, I think, from my parents. In many other cultures, like some European cultures, like in Italy, it's normal to be an adult and live with your parents. Especially in Asian cultures, you see a lot of families living together where they have multi-generations of, they have children, parents, and grandparents all living in one house. Those actually really have some advantages, and the stigma that we have in America of people living with their families, it's probably not such a good thing, especially being outside the US and seeing some of these other cultures. It can be a very good thing, but you don't necessarily have to live with your family. What me and my wife are looking to do is get a home, but not too far away, a short drive at least, because quite frankly, a lot of people, especially depending on your family and whatever your relationship is with your parents and such, there can be personality clashes, and that can create all kinds of problems in your life and actually make you further apart instead of closer together, even if you're physically closer together. So in our culture, maybe it's not a great idea to necessarily live with your family, but I think it's worth looking into of living close to your family, and that's basically what I think we're going to be doing in the future. So you can go ahead, leave me a comment. Did you ever have to move in or want to move in with your family, even if it's just to be closer to them and share a lot of great moments together? Go ahead, leave your thoughts down below.